This is what we are filming today. And yes, as no doubt many of you will say, it is an updated TUV300. But Mahindra call it the Bolero Neo. Yes, they have named it after this guy over here. Now the Bolero may be simple and basic, but that would be missing the point. You see, it's supposed to be a rugged, reliable, go-anywhere vehicle, built to take on the rough and tumble of the country around us. And it does that incredibly well. Just ask the thousands of owners around the country. But Mahindra say there's an increasing number of them that want an added layer of style and comfort. And that's what they say is offered in the Neo. So let's take a look and begin with the style. On the whole, the design is more TUV, but Mahindra have added a few Bolero elements to help with the association. Now over at the front, yes, the rectangular headlights are featured and prominently. They do have a new DRL signature. The grille, of course, the typical Mahindra grille is present, and the bumper over here gets the kind of slatted or the sloping cuts on the lower edge. Moving over to the side, you probably may not notice this on the camera, but it does look a little shorter, and that's because it is. Mahindra tell us they've lowered the body by about 20 mm and the bonnet another 20 mm further still. Now how they've done this is they've just lowered the body onto the chassis. So the chassis and the ground clearance, they say, remains the same. The alloys, you get a new pattern and they look quite smart and go with the kind of upright and straight lined edges around the car. One addition is this thick molding. Now this is a typical Bolero signature which they've added, bringing in that Bolero-ness because it needs that to carry off the new nameplate. Now what remains, as you can see, is the sloping B-pillar. I'm personally not a fan of it, but there are people who like it. It's, well, an aesthetic choice. There is one thing though, when you do open the door, it tends to come a little close to your face. Over at the rear, things are pretty similar to the TUV, though the X-shaped wheel cover now carries the Bolero branding. The tail lights are a little different, and the rest of it, of course, yeah, you do have a spoiler atop on the higher variant and your grab handle here to open the hatch, which you can see here has 2 jump seats. They are though not the best place to sit, as I have Saumil with me and we'll demonstrate. So yes, as you can see, space at the rear is quite tight. Saumil and I do have to kind of adjust our feet and knees and make sure we fit here. Having said that though, it is a little bit broader and just a smidgen more headroom than the regular Bolero. Now over the regular Bolero, you also get these butterfly windows here which will help with ventilation. Having said all this though, remember, space isn't really the problem. Rather, it's a matter of safety. There are no seat belts, and in case of a crash, this isn't the right place or the position to be in. So we'd suggest you use it as a boot only and stick to the seats up ahead. Over here at the rear or in the second row, as you can see, space isn't all that generous. Yeah, I do have about a little legroom for me here. This seat is adjusted to my driving position. I'm about 5'8", and yeah, there is some space underneath there too that you can tuck in your feet. On the whole though, it doesn't give you that sense of openness and kind of like a big SUV feel. The windows do compensate for that because they offer you a very nice view outside, and the sloping pillars that I didn't like, of course, they do help now in that they don't block or obstruct your view. Headroom is quite a lot and will be more than sufficient for most people. And yes, you do have an armrest here as well too. Over the regular Bolero, the seat cushioning is firmer and feels better and more supportive, and that holds true at the front too. Now here at the front, things are quite comfy. The seats do feel fairly supportive, and the armrests here fall to hand quite nicely, and you can reach comfortably for the gear lever. In terms of the dash and equipment though, things are pretty similar to the TUV earlier, though the IP here features a new 3.5-inch TFT display. The dashboard, yes, Mahindra say it has been designed by Pininfarina. It does look quite nice and symmetrical and balanced. In terms of equipment, you do have the touchscreen. Disappointingly though, it doesn't have Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. The other bits around the car, yes, you do have AC controls down here, and you do have an eco mode for the AC. This car also features a micro, hybrid or a start-stop technology. Other bits, there are storage areas up here. The glove box is just about okay. Does have a little pen holder, and there are a few cubby holes here, and that pretty much makes up the interior storage space. Power window switches, interestingly, are in the center, so they're not on the doors here. There's just one console for both you and the passenger. As for the equipment and variants, Mahindra has launched 3 variants, and the 4th, that will add on a mechanically locking differential, will come in a bit later. I'll get to what the mechanical locking differential does at the end of the video. Now, as far as driving the Neo goes, well, there's a lot to expect from the engine, especially since Mahindra do such a fantastic job of their powertrains. So the engine is the familiar 1.5 litre 3-cylinder MHOX unit, and it continues to make the same amount of power and torque as the TUV did. Though for the BS6 norms that this car is now launched with, of course, they do have an EVGT, and that has improved the drivability just a touch bit. Of course, it was always good, and now on the Neo it's that little bit better. Power comes in also quite early at about 1500. You get a nice strong surge, and then it tapers off at about 3500. And well, you'd have to upshift because there's really no point going beyond 4000. In terms of refinement, the engine is smooth, but sound levels are quite audible inside the cabin. But it's something you can look past on this class of a vehicle. As some of you would have guessed, we are at the Mahindra test track in Pune, and it's a rather small and simple one, so we can't really say much about the ride and handling. But the steering feel was well weighted, and there seems to be a little less body roll compared to the TUV. So unfortunately, we can't head out of the plant and really test the Bolero over the kind of terrain it would typically be used. But Mahindra have a small little off-road course for us over here, just to simulate a bit of rough roads and harsh conditions. And yes, the Bolero does perform expectedly quite well. Obviously, it is a controlled environment, and things are designed to make sure the Bolero goes through all of them easily. But in doing so, it does it in a very effortless manner and quite fuss-free. The chassis and the suspension just takes up everything quite well, and I think it should be really fine out on the rough and tumble of our roads and a little bit of the off-roads too. One thing that the Bolero Neo does have though to help it off-road is an automatic mechanically locking differential. Now what that is for example, like so, if I were to get one wheel up in the air, and well, the differential would obviously just send the power out to the wheel up in the air, spinning it helplessly. The differential here would lock automatically and send power to the wheel on the ground. So as soon as the RPM increases, there you go, you have a lock and you get power. So the Neo is quite capable, but is it a Bolero? For sure, the Bolero is a model that is rugged, and it screams that out with its style and character too. The Neo style, however, does not convey the same message. Underneath though, the Neo's new generation chassis is just as tough, if not tougher. The engine is the same, and here it puts out more power. And then there's the cabin. Both are similar in size, but the Neo is just so much more refined, better put together, and with a load of extra equipment too. And what's more is the pricing. In some cities, the Neo is actually more affordable, while in others the gap is only about 30 to 40,000 over. So yes, if you look past the Neo's exteriors, you'll find quite a capable Bolero underneath. Okay, so as promised, how do differentials work? Well, in a straight line, when I'm driving like this, the engine power is going equally to both wheels, the left and the right wheels. If, however, I were to take a turn, then the inner wheel travels a smaller part and the outer wheel needs to travel a larger part. And that's where the differential comes in. What it does is, for instance, like now, it's going to be sending a little less power to the inner wheel and more to the outer wheel. And it does that in a very simple fashion. It's a pure mechanical device. Resistance on the inner wheel causes some of the power to be transferred to the outer wheel. And that's it. That's quite simply it. Very clever little device, but it does create a little bit of a problem. In off-road conditions, there are times when you could have a wheel up in the air and the differential would just send the power to that wheel and it would spin helplessly. Now, what you can do is you can just brake that wheel, and which is what is called an electronic locking differential or a brake locking differential, where the brake just stops the wheel from rotating and therefore the differential, sensing the resistance, sends the power down to the wheel on the ground. Or you could also have a locking differential, a mechanically locking differential, which is what we have on this Bolero Neo. Interestingly, you don't have to select a lever or anything, it engages automatically. So, for example, I'm going to be getting onto an axle twister like this, and now we have one wheel up in the air. The outer wheel is up in the air, the inner wheel is down on the ground, and if I were to rev, you will see as soon as the RPM difference goes over 100, the mechanical lock will kick in and we'll have power. You can actually feel that lock and that engagement, and it's a bit harsh, of course, but as I said, it's a mechanical device, so you would probably feel the engagement and that little bit of a kick when the lock does engage.